Hi, everybody. Welcome to week 2 of Love Your Way Happy. I'm just going to wait for a couple of minutes and just see some people just jumping on there. And just while we wait, I'll just introduce a little friend that I've got. Let me see her. There she is. She's my very old dog that she's decided to join us tonight. I had it all set up, ready to go, and went to put the kids to bed and came back, and there's Shell sitting at the computer. And so I assumed she wanted to join us tonight on the live stream. So she's here, and it's actually quite cold here tonight. So I was very happy to have her to keep me a bit warm in the cooler weather. And so she's decided to join us, and she's keeping me warm. So if you hear any strange grunting noises, that's likely to be Shell, not me. And yeah, she's a very old dog, so she makes lots of strange noises and carry on. But as I say, she's decided to join us, so she can just sit here, and if you hear those noises, that'll be her. So yeah, this week just thought we'd touch base and talk a little bit about the last week of Love Your Way Happy. And so what we've been focusing on for the first few days was the fun and play. And I really hope you guys are having some fun with that and being able to think back on some of those things that perhaps you have found like playful or fun or enjoyable throughout your play history, and oftentimes as adults we kind of forget to incorporate that into our lives, and so that idea of all work and no play really undermines our mood. And so being able to remember that play is just as important for adults as it is for children. And there's a lot of research being done into the importance of play. And it used to be the idea that play was really something that children did to prepare them for adulthood. And what we know now is actually that play is far more than just a preparation for adulthood. Play is something that is actually a part of our makeup as human beings. It's one of the things that we do throughout the lifespan, and healthy adults are the ones that are doing, lots of the fun and play. And so importantly then, if that's not been an aspect of your life for some time, and it has been, a lot of work or not a great deal of enjoyment going on, that is certainly something to have a little look at. And if we're looking at Love Your Way Happy, if you are working towards those major goals that may take a little bit of time, then we want to make sure that we are in it for the long haul. And so what we're doing is then introducing those things that can make it sustainable. So the things that we find fun, I guess, as an example of perhaps blowing off some steam and being able to really put fuel back in the tank. And so I really hope that you've been having some fun with that little task that you've been set over the first few days of this week. And I'd be really curious to know what you guys have been getting up to. If you have read the newsletter, I did talk a little bit about my return to fun and play that I've experienced in recent months. And I talked about in the newsletter how my sister and I as kids used to rock out in the living room, grab our hairbrushes and sing at the top of our lungs. And we used to have all sorts of fun, recording ourselves and filming ourselves and just pretending that we were rock stars. But music and singing have always been a big part of my life, but I've never really done anything with it in terms of creating it as a hobby until recently. And my friends and family have joined just a singing for fun at the Casuarina College. And so, we decided to do that, and it's just been an absolute blast, I tell you, just returning to something that, I always do that with the kids and stuff like that, but to actually do that for myself has just been so much fun. And, it's just been something that is helping me to kind of remember and tune into something that I used to do as a kid, but also then bringing it forward to adulthood. Like, as I say, that doesn't have to stop in adulthood. and is something that is just, just a whole lot of fun, really. And so the other thing that was in that audio was just a process to help you to connect then with some of those things historically that you've done for fun, but also some of those things to tap you into the humour and the laughter. And, you don't need to be told just how important, having laughter in your life is. And, as children, again, we see that kids laugh, a lot throughout the day and every day at the most ridiculous things. And as adults, though, that, as life perhaps gets a bit more serious and as we have more responsibilities, we kind of forget, to laugh. And, there aren't as many opportunities to laugh. And so in that audio, what I was encouraging you to do was to think back, if laughter is a big part of your daily life, then go you. But if it isn't, then, being able to tune into those things that you find funny. Like humour is something that is very specific, but those things that you actually find funny and humorous, and so that you can actually seek that out in your life. That if you look at a lot of the research around comedians, that they actually seek out humour to be able to then hone their own sense of comedy and the love of the absurd. And so, that we can do that too. You don't have to be a comedian to do that. But just to recognise that, laughter, I guess similar to crying in some ways, that these are all releases. But laughter is obviously something that, is a lot more fun, and that we can actually start to seek that out. I guess the World Wide Web is such an amazing resource now that we can tap into those sorts of things. So if you found something funny in the past, like a favourite comedian, or there's a particular show that you like, that you can tune into that and you can tap into that, using the internet, such an amazing resource that we have. And you can seek it out. So even if it's like a 5-minute thing that you can have a little chuckle to yourself, or a podcast or something like that, to really set your intention to bring more of that into your life. And so in that audio that was included in that 3-day section, that was something that I was really encouraging you to do. And so with the fun and play, really then looking at a few things. So one, which is, how to make those tasks that we have to do, how do we make them fun? And interestingly, I was mentioning, the housework, and I've done a bit of reading around the importance of boredom. And so I've started to rethink the whole housework thing and say, well, actually, there's a lot of evidence to suggest that boredom allows then our creative juices to start to flow. And oftentimes that's when our best ideas come. So, watch out, I'll start to clean the house and I might have some really brilliant ideas. So, really starting to look at that a little bit differently and reframing it such that then it's purposeful and it's something that you can actually start to perhaps get something out of. And so doing those things that we kind of have to do in a bit of a different way, but then also looking at those things that we do enjoy doing, and how can we make them even more fun. And so the example that I gave was, some of my writing with the course, and doing that in a setting that is really enjoyable for me, so it's relaxing. And that was just one example, being able to do, what you have to do and do what you love to do, but really turning your mind into something that, that you can make it fun, and also introducing some of the humour and really starting to seek that out. That would be great. And so, so I guess I'm just going to type that in. So what have you guys been doing for fun and play? And so what have you remembered? I think that's how you spell it. What have you remembered that you have found humorous or funny, and have been able to tap back into that? Okay, so I'm just going to pin those comments And if you've got any comments there and you have any ideas and you'd like to share them, I'd really like for this to be interactive. I know last week was a bit of a challenge because I had to do it on my phone. But ideally these sessions are interactive. And that we're really starting to see, how it is that you're engaging with the content. Even if you don't have any questions, I'd love to hear, what it is that you're getting up to and how it is that you're implementing. So really, if we're looking at one of the main principles of Love Your Way Happy is those things that we do every day what add up to make changes over time in your life. And so they don't have to be big things. Like I say, if you seek out something funny for 5 minutes every day for a week, that really then starts to change your mindset and what we start to look for in our life actually starts to change. So as we start to feel better, we start to feel more creative, we start to feel more inspired. And so again, to make these sessions as interactive as we can, ideally it's better if I can be on the computer and be putting those questions out to you guys. And so if you're not able to jump on live, then you certainly comment at a later time because this is something obviously that's organic and that that you can add to at any time. So I really encourage you guys, if you're watching this as a home study as opposed to watching it live, then I'd encourage you to be commenting there when you get the chance, or now if you have anything that you want to add and celebrations or things that you've remembered and you've been implementing. Okay, so that's the fun and play side of things. And I really do hope that you actually have had a chance to do some of that. And if you haven't, then now's your opportunity to start to do that. Okay, and so the other section was about the setbacks, the dealing with setbacks. And so I really purposefully did that in that way. So we start with the fun and play and really start to see that we're positively engaging with life and really starting to turn our mind towards things that actually make us happy. At the same time, if we look at happiness and ideally what we're starting to do is to redefine happiness. And happiness really is about that idea where we can have those enjoyable things in our life, but also knowing that you've got the capacity to cope with the setbacks or the difficult times. And so what we know is that there's a lot of struggle that comes about through avoidance of negative emotion and the fear of negative experiences. And so actually it's the struggle to avoid negative experiences which actually causes probably most of our unhappiness, if not all of it, because we're so living in fear then of those bad things happening, or so that then we're avoiding those things, or we really don't want to feel those negative emotions because we don't know what they mean, or we feel we'll get stuck in them, and so we avoid negative emotions. But when we look at our emotional system, it kind of is a little bit like it's an on and an off thing. And so if you start to block those negative emotions and we kind of numb those negative emotions, we have a sense of a whole numbing of the emotional system. And so if you're blocking the negative emotions, or the so-called negative emotions, so sadness or anger or even fear, that we then limit our capacity to experience the flip side. And so if we actually look at happiness and redefining happiness, what we're looking at is the balance. So yes, we want to cultivate those positive habits that will help us to experience more gratitude and love and connectivity and belonging and all of those ones that we want to have, whilst at the same time we're learning to manage the flip side where we have sadness or anger or despair or loneliness or things like that. That as part of the human experience, we have the full gamut of emotion. We also have, if we look at that dealing with the setbacks, if we're actually moving in a direction in life that's meaningful and purposeful, we are going to be put in a position where we need to take risks. And by risks, what we're really setting ourselves up for is the potential where we may not get it right, where it may be done imperfectly, or we may make mistakes. And so really how we deal with that is just so key. And so if we look at the first strategy, that journaling process, what it was encouraging you to do was to have a look at some of those things, at some of those setbacks or mistakes or failures or however you have described them to yourself, and then to look at them and start to dig below the surface to say, okay, well, what is it that I've learned here? And so really guiding you and directing you to be able to look at those experiences that we've had as potential learning opportunities. And so that journaling process, which was the first set of those dealing with those setbacks, was really an invitation for you to look at that and start to explore that for yourself in your own life. And then the second part of that was the audio and on the perfectionism. And so perfectionism, if we actually look at it, is when we are connecting our self-worth with perfect performance. So it's not really about anything to do with having high standards. It is in part, but having high standards doesn't necessarily make you a perfectionist. And so how it's defined is that tendency to link our self-worth with our performance, and that if we don't get it right or we make mistakes, we experience setbacks, then we become self-recriminating, and we take it personally and we see that we've failed. And so the audio was really one of those invitations to be able to work through that a little bit and to start to see that a little bit differently and to soften around that experience a little bit. And so then opening up to being able to tolerate mistakes, but also to start to view them a little bit differently. And so I might just type that in there too. What was your experience with the perfectionism audio? I'd be certainly keen to know how you went with that. What was your experience with the perfectionism audio? That's hilarious. What was your experience of the perfectionism audio? And then I cut you off. Apologies for that, and I hope you guys can jump back on. Yeah, I thought I was pressing enter. Anyway, so as you can see, mistakes are made, and how do we bounce back from that? Oh dear. And so that's a perfect example of that. So again, I hope you guys can jump back on, but I'm just going to continue on. And so so the perfectionism audio, I'd be curious to know how you went with that. And so then the third part of that process was about that growth mindset, and that was a video, so I don't necessarily feel like I need to go into that one too much. But I guess the two sessions, so the dealing with setbacks and the perfectionism audio, were really a lead in to that. And so I guess we can see how the growth mindset really ties in with what those two strategies were really trying to get you to orient your mind towards. And so that idea of the growth mindset really being that opportunity for us to see our mistakes as something that are learning experiences, for us to be able to keep moving forward in our life, even when we have made mistakes. And actually there is a theory around what they call accelerated failure. And so, the more mistakes that you make, the more opportunity for learning that you have. And so if we can speed that up, so we just keep doing it and keep trying and getting back up, that there is a theory around that actually leading to success more quickly. So thank you for jumping back from there. Sorry about cutting you off. So that idea of accelerated failure being something that, if the more we try, and the more we kind of risk making those mistakes, the sooner we learn those valuable lessons that we need to learn. And so, if we go back to what we talked about for me, last week when I talked about setting up the groups, if I had have sat on that and waited for that group to be perfect, then I would never have gotten to that point where I realised, hey, that setting wasn't actually right for me. And so I probably wouldn't have been here as quickly as I was. But actually doing it gave me that traction to realise, hey, this still needs to be evolved. And, you know, what you see before you now is that, you know, clearly I'm taking the courses online. And so, but that I would never have gotten there had I, you know, waited for the course to be perfect or waited, you know, for various conditions to be met. And so, you know, that idea, as much as I wouldn't perceive that as a failure, I certainly would see that as something that, you know, I guess I had to do in order to be able to get to the point where I realised that it still needs to be evolved, it needs to be tweaked. And I guess if we then look at anything that we do as a learning process, then we could start to look at these things really as experiments. Okay, so let's experiment with whatever it is that you've got going on. And then we can do that analysis afterwards and say, well, how did that go? And so in some ways, what we're doing is becoming a bit scientific about it. And so we're standing back as a bit of an observer and we're saying, okay, well, yeah, I tried that. How did that go? You know, what can I learn from it? And really we can be that, we can start to be that scientific about it if we so choose. So we're standing back from it. We're seeing, you know, how it went, what worked, what didn't, what changes might I want to make, and then what aligned action can I take now, having learnt those lessons. And so it does mean that we can, you know, observe these things sort of like the scientist practitioner. So we're standing there and we're watching it and we're observing it, and we are then learning from that, and then, you know, again taking aligned action as a result of that learning. And so it is a bit of a different mindset, but ultimately what we find is that that is where we experience the greatest rate of growth. And so again, that growth mindset, there's a lot of evidence to suggest that when people adopt that growth mindset, they're more likely to take risks. They're more likely to want to try, because failure doesn't mean doom and gloom. It doesn't mean anything about you. It just means, well, maybe I didn't know what I needed to know, or maybe I need to put in more effort, or maybe, again, I need to do, there's some more learning that I need to have. And so that growth mindset allows us to take more risks. It makes mistakes just that little bit less scary. And so we can, you know, try bigger things in our life, essentially. So again, I'd really be curious to hear how you guys are going with that. I won't risk pressing the finish button again. But yeah, so I'd be curious to know how you guys are going with all of that. And so, yeah, so pretty much that's it for this week, unless there are any questions. You know, I'll just open that up. And I'll press enter, and that worked great. I'll just Q and Q. Q&A is what that's meant to be. Q and A. Got it. Yeah. And I'll just pin that one too. Yeah, so any questions on what's been happening for you over the last little while, last week? And, you know, again, even if, you know, over the last, that first little bit with that, the planning, I really hope you guys have turned your mind to that, because that is something that will set you up for the rest of the course. So really thinking about what it is that you want to get out of Love Your Way Happy. You know, you're investing your time, and, you know, that does mean a lot. So, you know, really setting your mind to having a review of your year, and then looking at what we talked about last time, which was setting some of those internal goals. I'd encourage you to. Yes, you can set some external ones, but setting those internal goals. So the internal goals being, okay, so committing to, you know, being kinder to yourself, or committing to take aligned action. Like I said last time, you know, really starting to listen to yourself. In my case, you know, that was what mine was. You know, really starting to tune and listen to what's actually most important to me. And so, you know, when we do that, we're much more in alignment with our values, and we're much more likely then to take action that's going to get us to where we really want to go. And so, again, if you can have a look at that session one, really review your year, and then setting some of those internal goals, which will set you up for the rest of the course. Okay, so it doesn't look like there's any questions for now. And again, I'd encourage you guys, if you're listening to this a little bit later, if you can jump on live, that would be really, really great, just so that then we can get some of that interaction. If you are listening to it a little bit later, that's fine too. You can post your comments or your questions, and I'll make sure that I'm checking back and answering them. So have a great week, everybody, and I'm super excited about what I've got coming up for you in the next week, and I will see you again next Wednesday at 8 o'clock. Okay, see ya.